Ben Habib. Ben, how are you?
Good afternoon. Good to see you, Jonathan. Very well, thank you.
Well,
How are
always
you?
delighted to see you, Ben, and thank you so much for once again coming on the show. Look, Ben, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, just get angry and rant and then let you chime
Yeah,
in after me.
absolutely.
Because I am astonished that Sir Keir Starmer's number 10 Downing Street today is ruling out giving whole life orders to children because he's saying he's restricted by the UN Convention on the rights of the child. What about the rights of the children that were stolen by this callous, cruel, cold, vicious animal that took those innocent children's lives and caused harm, irreversible harm, psychologically in many cases, to those who survived? But Sir Keir Starmer's number 10 saying that the government takes, and I quote, its commitment to international law seriously. This notion of international law, Ben, is boring and exhausting, and it's putting some fake idea of what international law is on a pedestal over the lives and safety and security of the British people. You must be as angry as I am to hear this.
I'm absolutely furious. And the Rudakubana case reveals the absolute repugnant nature of the way this Labour government is thinking. What we discovered during the sentencing of Rudakubana was known to Keir Starmer within hours of the killings having taken place, and to Yvette Cooper and Merseyside Police. And yet they've travelled 6 months, and during that period, they've taken no steps whatsoever to address the root cause of Rudakubana. And let's just say what the root cause is without being shy. The root cause is mass migration, often with people coming to this country who hold our country in antipathy, who make no effort to be integrated. The regulatory and legal framework, in fact, gives them the entitlement not to integrate, protects and promotes them in whatever culture it is they wish to hold. No attempt has been made to reveal the truth about Rudakubana by the Prime Minister. No attempt has been made to set right this liberal global order that delivered Rudakubana's father to our shores. No introspection whatsoever from this government. And yet, here he was a few days ago talking about how Amazon are to blame because they sold him a knife. You can pick up a knife from your mother's kitchen table. The absurdity of the deflection is ridiculous. And now for him saying that he won't even countenance proper punishment for this. If this was the 16th century, I would say Rudakubana's possessed by the devil. That is how evil this chap is. And for him to say he won't countenance proper sentencing for him because of some commitment to the UN, we are hijacked. This liberal global order has hijacked domestic governance. We can't run the United Kingdom for the benefit of this country and for the benefit of these people. We are unable to protect our own people because of this liberal global order. We can't enforce our borders. We can't ditch net zero. We can't deregulate. We can't cut taxes. We can't sentence horrible criminals. It's got to stop. And the fact that the Prime Minister can get up this today and say what he said absolutely confirms my worst fears that they're completely out of touch with what their primary obligation is, which is to protect and promote this country. That's what they've got to do. And before they can promote, they've got to protect, and they're failing fundamentally in protecting us.
Now, Ben, if I may, obviously just offer a different perspective. People would say that this isn't to do about migration. His parents were migrants. He was born in Wales, born in this country, educated in this country, and actually has self-radicalised himself through online material that he's been able to access. And therefore, we need to have a much further look. In fact, we had an eminent KC on earlier who said we need to have a serious conversation looking at the Online Safety Act around how material is accessed. Do you agree that we need to go further when it comes to accessing online material? Do you think it's an unfair argument, in your view, to suggest that somehow that we should just be blaming the tech entrepreneurs, the tech bros as they've now become, when actually, as this case has pointed out, time and again, the police, Prevent, were warned about this individual and took no action?
Yeah, so we've seen all this before, haven't we, Jonathan? I think it's, again, another deflection to say this has got nothing to do with the unsettled culture of this country. We just had a debate for the last month or so over the gang rape gangs and the way that the institutions that are charged to protect us actually turned a blind eye, were too shy of being accused of being racist or xenophobic or whatever it was to do their job. The police, social services, local councils, and so on. And the fact that Rudakubana wasn't challenged is, again, I think, testimony to the same problem. And And I'll just say one more thing on this. The Prime Minister described him as a Welshman. Well, when you colloquially describe someone as a Welshman, it conjures up all sorts of images in your mind. What it does not conjure up is an image of what Rudakubana is. You may think of a Welsh farmer. You may think of a Welshman in a pub or a rugby player or whatever. You don't think of the individual that is Rudakubana. And I think it is relevant that he is of recent Rwandan descent. I think you can't escape from it. And I'm sure that the three opportunities that Prevent were given in order to nip this in the bud, I'm sure part of their thinking was the fact that he is, of African descent, and this fear, this utter fear of calling things out, and for fear, of being called racist. It's got to stop.
But Ben, wouldn't you be accused of stirring up racial hatred if we're pointing out the fact that his African heritage has got... People would say it's got nothing to do with why he committed the crime that he committed. His Rwandan heritage has got nothing to do with why he committed the crime that he did. This man was just clearly pure evil and was intent on harming and murdering children.
I'm not stirring up racial hatred. My dad's Punjabi. I'm half Pakistani. My mother's English. For me, race is irrelevant. But what you've got to have in a country is an institutional framework which is blind to ethnicity, a criminal justice system which is blind to ethnicity, a preparedness to call out things as they are, without fear and without favor. But when you take into your country the masses of number of people that we've taken in from lots of different cultures, it's not the color of the individual that matters, it's the culture and the values that they hold. When you take them into your country at the rate we've taken them in, and you have no vision on integration, and you in fact create a regulatory and legislative framework that protects their right to practice their culture and their religious beliefs and so on in the country, promotes them, and often, as again, Jonathan, I'm digressing, but as we've seen, recruitment policies from the RAF to GCHQ to the Bank of England focus on the ethnicity of people, not their ability to do their job. You are undermining the country, and we've got to stop it. And it's possible that Rudakubana his ethnicity didn't play in protecting him in any way whatsoever. Prevent was just asleep at the wheel. The police who interviewed him a couple of times were asleep at the wheel. It's possible. All of that's possible. But there are far too many of these incidents taking place for this just to be a coincidence. And the gang rape gangs, that has been brought into sharp relief in the last month. And I would ask people to join the dots and see that there's a lot of commonality with what's going on. And we do have a two-tier criminal justice system, a criminal justice system that is fearful of doing the right thing, and that just has to stop. We even had the Crime Sentencing Commission. I don't know if you remember this, Jonathan. About a year ago, the Crime Sentencing Commission, which is the body charged for guiding courts on what sort of sentencing they should provide, saying that someone's background should be taken into account when you're sentencing someone. They were actually advocating for a two-tier criminal justice system. The reason the lady above the Old Bailey is blindfolded is because justice should be blind. It should be blind.
Well, look, Ben, I would definitely agree with you about the complete failure of our public services. And I think that what I'm concerned by, and I'm sure you will be too, is that this animal's been caught numerous times with a knife on him. And yet the most I can see he ever received was a 10-month youth community order, whatever the hell that is meant to be.
Yeah.
Do you think, and understandably, the public will be outraged if there isn't some sort of prosecution against those in power, the establishment, whether that be in our police, whether it be in Prevent, whether it be in social services, whether it be in the education sector, for negligence and failure to act when they had so many warning signs about this individual, and yet nobody, as you say, joined the dots. I'm getting sick and tired of the establishment always ending up getting the ability to write a review. You'll always end up seeing one or two people being sacked, normally made redundant, let's be perfectly frank, and then move on, but never actually held properly to account. For the public to trust public services, they need to see that when there's been negligence in the public sector, like the private sector, not only will you be kicked out of the door, but particularly in the private sector, you can be criminally held responsible for failing to do your duty.
And Jonathan, you've hit the nail absolutely on the head. And that's why the inquiry into the gang rape gangs is so important. Because if you don't have a proper inquiry and really hold to account those who should have been protecting us, you can't move forward with confidence in your institutions. The British people will have no confidence in their institutions. And before we leave Rudakubana, let's not forget that the Prime Minister was up in 2 seconds flat when the protest took place, categorizing everyone as far right and directing the criminal justice system to arrest them, detain them, incarcerate them in the shortest possible order. And there is at least one individual who is now dead as a result of the approach the Prime Minister took, because he hanged himself in prison because he couldn't take a prison sentence. His biggest crime had been to shout at the police and put some conspiratorial words on a placard. And yet here we have a Prime Minister who turned up in Southport, turned his back to a grieving crowd, would not face the crowd, put his flowers down, exited in double quick time, went to a party in 10 Downing Street, knew exactly what Rudakubana was like, took no steps to call it out for what it was. And by the way, I think if he had called it out for what it was, we wouldn't have had the protests in the way that we had the protests, because it was partly born out of suspicion and a cover-up that the protests took place in the way that they took place. If we'd had a Prime Minister who'd done the right thing at the beginning and continued to do the right thing, we'd be in a much better place now. But still, he's obfuscating. He blames Amazon. He talks about international law. For God's sake, man, 3 children are dead because of this complete lunatic. Others have had their lives destroyed. The community will take ages to recover. The United Kingdom is crying out for the government to do the right thing by the country and by its people. And he's got to, the hell with the UN. The UN doesn't run the United Kingdom. He does. And he's got to get a grip. Sorry, that was a rant. Forgive me.
No, but Ben, I think you say a lot of things I'm hearing, certainly in Stoke-on-Trent when I'm out and about in the community. And actually, you touched on a story I did want to reach with you, the astonishing story that the Mail on Sunday broke about the fact that, as you say, the Keir Starmer went up to Southport, spent, I think it was around 19 seconds, laying a wreath, and then has hopped back to Downing Street, where he's got a garden party for celebrity Labour backers. I mean, people got upset because Boris Johnson, on one occasion in the Cabinet Office, with civil servants on the other side of the table, who, by the way, never got fined them, but the 2 politicians in the room, which is the Cabinet Office, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, got fined because they were sat at a table where there was cans of Coke, Tesco sandwiches and a birthday cake. Are you astonished that for the man who was so virtuous in Sir Keir Starmer to say that this is outrageous, chose to go and enjoy himself a drinks party in the Gardens of Downing Street with some so-called celebrity Labour backers? Does it just not astonish you that that's the decision the Prime Minister took on that day?
It absolutely does. And on that day, Jonathan, I didn't know the vile nature of the wounds inflicted by that piece of vermin. But when I saw I saw the Prime Minister doing what he did when he laid his flowers, and I was appalled because I could see women behind. I don't know if you remember this. There were women standing in the crowd behind him in tears, exclaiming to the Prime Minister, please do something to protect our community. The footage that you're showing now doesn't show what happened behind the Prime Minister, but on the day I saw that. And now to discover that actually he went on to a party, and by the time he got to that party, he would have known that one of the girls had been slashed 122 times, another one 80 times, that an attempt had been made to sever the 6-year-old's head from her body. He would have known all of this. When I heard the sentencing and I heard this all disclosed, was it yesterday? I was sickened. I mean, I was literally sickened. I felt like throwing up. And the Prime Minister could lay his wreath and move smoothly, seamlessly onto a party. There's something not right. And even now he's in denial. For God's sake, it's out in the open. We know precisely what happened. Call it for what it is, Prime Minister, and do your job, which is to protect the British people and make sure this does not happen again. Take all the steps necessary to make sure it does not happen again.
Ben, if I may, quickly just going to a different point. Rachel Reeves is in Davos. She's begging the international community to protect her and make it clear that she's the Iron Chancellor, that she's so desperate to betray herself. You're a respected and successful businessman. What do you make of the state of the current economy? Do you think Rachel Reeves can survive this?
I mean, I'm not sure the British economy can survive it. Funny enough, after the budget, not funny enough, I mean, I was on GB News after the budget and I said, actually, I think we're in a doom loop. What she's done is condemn this country to a recession, and sterling will weaken because we're in a recession. And we will import inflation, so interest rates will stay up, which means it'll be even more difficult to grow the economy. And people will stop wanting to buy British government bonds because they'll look at the UK and they'll say, why would we invest in British government bonds? We've got other places to put our money. And that is precisely what has happened in the last 3 months. We're heading into recession. Interest rates are staying up because inflation is staying stubbornly high. Sterling has dropped. And actually, we had more government borrowing in December. I think it was the third highest government borrowing on record in December. And the equation, as balanced by the Office of Budget Responsibility when she came out with her budget, was very finely balanced. They said the taxes, assuming the tax rises that she instituted, raise the money they think it's going to raise will be about 36 billion, which means there's going to be around another 32 to 34 billion of extra borrowing each year. And that was just about tolerable. But we're going to breach the borrowing levels that the OBR forecast. We're going to have to borrow much more money. And if there is a strike on buying British government bonds, of which there must be a real risk now, we will have a sovereign debt crisis in the United Kingdom. We haven't had a sovereign debt crisis since the 1970s, and it will be on her watch, and she would have done it within 6 months of taking office. All that nonsense about growing the economy was just that, utter nonsense.
Ben, if I may, with you as a businessman and obviously knowing people in the business community, how are they feeling about the national insurance increase that's coming? I mean, as you say, I've said to lots of people, the problem that the Labour government's not understood is that this is yet to actually come into force, and we will do in April. So they, still on really a honeymoon period in the sense of the real harm that's coming hasn't actually yet arrived on their doorstep. Do you think there is a chance that Rachel Reeves will have broken her fiscal rules and that we might have to see either more extravagant borrowing or extravagant tax rises or severe public sector cuts in order to somehow try and balance the books, or God forbid, as you refer to 1970s, try and get a bailout from the IMF?
Well, I think we're heading towards that bailout. I think that she's going to have to borrow. She's already having to borrow more money than was forecast, and which means she either has to cut government spending, which I think she should do. I think she should slash benefits for people who've been out of job for more than 12 months. I think we've got to get real in this country. We're standing on the precipice of an economic disaster. She's got to slash benefits. Just on that, our benefits bill is pushing 100 billion a year, and we're taking in income tax about 300 billion. A third of our income tax goes on benefits. I mean, it's absurd. The majority of this country are working to pay for people not to work. And that is how you break a country's economy.
And by the way, Ben, very quickly, the top 1% of earners, who the Labour Party like to bash and make out that they're all just selfish millionaires, actually pay, what is it, around 29% of the income tax receipts?
Absolutely.
That top 1% pay an awful lot of that tax money. If those people go off, that's going to, and which they are in their droves, as we know already. That's why Rachel Reeves is in Davos begging them to stay in the UK. What's that going to do to the UK economy?
Again, you're in a doom loop. And America is deregulating, it's cutting taxes, it's ditching net zero to make energy cheaper, which means America's going to boom. And when America booms, more millionaires will leave the United Kingdom and go to the States. More capital will leave the United Kingdom and go to the United States, because it'll have a lower tax regime in which to invest and a growth economy. She doesn't get it. She is, and you say you're quite right to say we're in a honeymoon period, if you like, a grace period with her national insurance increases. The impact hasn't been felt, but businesses have three options with the national insurance increase. You sack people, you don't give people salary rises, or you go bust. Those are the three options.